January 23rd, 2022, Nathan Whipple violently R-words a woman who he picks up in his car as part of a rideshare. After he gets done beating her severely and assaulting her, he takes her back to her house and drops her off. This woman has no idea who this man is that assaulted her, so for the next few months, herself and her husband are desperately trying to figure out who this man was. There wasn't any record of him on an Uber app. She had called for many Ubers, and apparently he had disguised himself as one and taken advantage. The woman who he assaulted found out who he was on her own, without help from the police because they weren't being very helpful. And eventually, when his DNA was tested 10 months later, it came back as a match. Now, Nathan recorded this on his phone, and when the cops saw the video, they said this could be interpreted as you enjoying it, so the case was dropped.
The mirror in the attic. While cleaning out her late grandmother's attic, a woman stumbles upon an old dusted-covered mirror with an ornate frame. At night, she notices something unsettling, a shadowy figure standing behind her reflection, motionless, watching. She spins around, but the attic is empty. Over the next few days, the figure remains, never moving, never blinking. One evening, in a burst of fear and frustration, she shatters the mirror with a hammer. The relief is short-lived. The next morning, deep claw marks streak across her bedroom door, fresh and jagged. Whatever had been trapped inside the mirror is no longer contained. The last text. A grieving man still texts his deceased wife's number, knowing it's pointless, just a way to cope. One evening, his phone buzzes. A reply. "Come home, I miss you." His heart pounds. He stares at the screen, disbelief mixing with sickened dread. The house they once shared had been abandoned for months, dust thick on the windows, furnished drapes and sheets. He rushed there, hands shaking as he types a response. The next message arrived instantly. "I'm not the one who died." His breath catches. He looks around, the silence pressing in. Then he notices something in the cracked hallway mirror. His own reflection isn't there. The neighbor's dog. A couple moves into a quiet neighborhood, but their new neighbor's dog is aggressive, barking furiously whenever they step outside. It growls at their window. They complain, but the neighbor only shakes his head. He's just protective. Then one night, the barking stops. A tense silence fills the air. The couple open their door to find the dog cowering, whimpering, staring at something behind them. They turn. Just as the porch light flickers, lying on their doorstep is their neighbor's body, claw marks shredded across the chest. The dog wasn't a threat. It was the warning. Why did it just end there? I need to hear more.
Several bodies have been found shackled, both hands and feet, just off the coast of Mallorca in Spain, and nobody's talking about this. A major investigation has just been launched after at least 5 bodies have been recovered, and the beaches are now being referred to as a graveyard. It's being said that the bodies are believed to be migrants who attempted to cross into Spain through Algeria. It's looking like these individuals could have been confronted, handcuffed, shackled up, thrown back into the sea to drown. A private vessel made the alert when they spotted a body off the coast of Formentera. These 5 bodies that have been found are being treated and investigated as very violent deaths. In the last 6 months alone, over 30 bodies have been found around the Balearic beaches, including Ibiza. You let me know what you think about this, who these people could be and what happened to them. This is just so beyond scary to imagine.
A woman who went missing for 12 days in Australia has just been found alive. It was the 29th of June 2025 when loved ones of Carolina Wilger last heard from her. The 26-year-old German backpacker had been last seen at a shop in Beacon, Western Australia. Despite the fact that she loved hiking and loved being active, it was incredibly strange of her to just totally go off the radar and not contact her loved ones. She would always keep in contact with her family and friends on these solo hikes. And honestly, it really wasn't looking good. I was fearing the worst. This has been all over the news. Photos of her Mitsubishi van were being circulated in a desperate attempt to try and get any answers about the missing woman. And after 10 days of no sign of her, her abandoned van was in fact found. This was pretty terrifying because she wasn't with her van. It was in a remote area of the outback, and it was clear that the van had become stuck, and there had been efforts to get it unstuck basically, but it had been unsuccessful. And at this point, to the absolute horror of everybody in the community, homicide detectives were deployed. But just a day later, Carolina was found by a member of the public. She was limping by the side of the road with just one shoe on, in an absolutely fragile state apparently. But most importantly, she was alive. When emergency services got to her, they described her as having been ravaged by mosquitoes and had survived trauma. She was immediately flown by police jet to receive urgent medical treatment and has been recovering in hospital. She actually said to the press, "First and foremost, I want to express a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart, a thank you that truly comes from the depth of my soul, for all the incredible support during the search for me." She said she was deeply impressed by the courage, helpfulness and warmth that she'd been shown. She said, "Western Australia has taught me what it really means to be part of a true community. Here, humanity, solidarity and care for one another are what truly matter. In the end, that's what counts most."
So this is a bit of an older case. Julia Murray, she was 21 years old in 2010. She's from Georgia, and she tried to kill both her kids in a bathtub before shooting herself, and then called 911 to report what she had just done. Fortunately, first responders were able to get there in time to save her son's life, but her daughter was not as lucky. And after shooting herself in the chest, Julia also died. I'm about to play the 911 call, so just viewer discretion advised. It is a bit disturbing, so watch at your own discretion.
Glen Brunswick 911, what is your emergency?
Yes, sir. I need an ambulance to come to my house.
What's the problem now?
I just killed my 2 kids.
What's your name, ma'am?
Julia Murray.
What is it?
Julia Murray.
And you said you killed your 2 kids?
Yes, sir.
How old are they?
2 and 4.
How did you kill them?
I drowned them.
Did you drown them?
Yes.
You drowned them in the tub, or how did you do that? Ma'am? Julia? Julia? Hello, are you there? Julia? Are you there, Julia? Julia, are you with me?
No, I just shot myself.
You just shot yourself?
Yes.
With what?
A gun.
Okay.
Please hurry.
Okay, I got him on the way, Julia. I'm just trying to keep you on line with me until they get there. Is that okay? Will you talk to me? Julia, can you hear me? Julia, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Julia? Julia, can you hear me?
Y'all, so picture this. It's a nice little summer night, you know. You're going to the store real quick before the store closes to get you something to eat, some snacks, something, right? And to go to the store, you have to go through an alley. An alley that might look like this. But there's nothing to worry about, right? You take this road all the time when you're going to the store. Except you didn't take into consideration that the month that you're in is December. And quite frankly, December is the month with the most witchcraft done because it's towards the end of the year. Anyway, so you walk through the alley like usual, but you see $20 on the floor. It's your lucky day. You find $20 on the floor. That's 20 extra babies. As you're about to pick it up, something tells you, I don't think you should be touching that money. But then again, it's 20 extra babies, bro. You could buy some food with that. So you brush off that feeling. You like, this is my lucky day. This is my 20. And you pick up the $20 bill and you put it in your pocket. As you're putting it in your pocket and you start to walk away, the moment you look up, you see a black cat right there, standing in the alleyway, facing you. Now, where the hell did that cat come from? It's not moving. It's just standing there. You're a little creeped out, so you try to do a little so the cat can run away, but it didn't budge. At this point, your gut feeling is telling you, don't walk near that cat. Something is off about it. But then again, you just got 20 extra babies and you can get more stuff from the store. You already started walking towards the store anyway. So as careful as possible, you walked right past that cat and you go to the store. Not taking into account that you also had to walk through the same alley to go back home. Go to the store, you spend that 20 babies, you got some snacks, some food, some drinks, you start to head back home. And thankfully, on the way back home, that black cat was nowhere to be found. So you go home like everything, you enjoy your snacks, And when you get tired, you go to bed like usual. Except at 3 a.m. sharp in the morning, you wake up in cold sweats, only to realize that same black cat that you saw earlier from the alley is standing on top of you, on your bed.
McDonald's ghost stories. I was working a late shift cleaning up the restrooms after a busy Friday night. While I was wiping the baby changing area, I heard a strange moan come from one of the stalls. I was the only person in the restroom. I checked the stall to see if it was an animal or something, but nothing was in there. I turned around and in the mirror I saw the reflection of a woman, just her head and torso floating. She was trying to talk to me, but it sounded all garbled and I couldn't hear what she was saying. I ran out of that bathroom so fast. Dude, what? Why is this lady hanging out in the bathroom of a McDonald's? Here's another one. I was a maintenance worker at McDonald's. One of my tasks was cleaning and repairing the playland area. One night I was climbing through the slides and the tunnels and heard a child's laughter echo through the crawl space. It was weird because the restaurant was closed and I was there alone, but I thought it was maybe coming from outside. I turned the corner and saw a little girl in a pink sweater go down the slide by herself. I checked the bottom of the slide to see if she came out of it, but there was no one there. There was a tragic accident a few years back on the road next to our building that involved a family. I always wondered if she was involved in that. I have never seen her since then, but I always feel a presence watching over me. That's really sad. Okay, last one. There is a ghost of a former customer who haunts our location. What? She was an older lady who would come here all the time. All of our employees see her when the restaurant is empty, usually in the early mornings. Her figure sits in one of the booths. She doesn't say anything and only stays a few seconds before her figure vanishes. I still don't know to this day why she chose to haunt this place. Maybe she just loved the food that much. I mean, same. She's not evil though, it's just a little startling sometimes. Do you have a ghost story at a McDonald's or any fast food establishment? Let me know in the comments.
Okay, so I already shared this picture on my Facebook, not on the video, but I just posted the story and the photos. And I think a lot of people were confused because they weren't reading the caption. So I'm like, let me make a video so I can explain what you're looking at. My mom took this photo and sent it to me thinking it was weird that the string was floating, but never noticed the figure in the back. 3 months after sending me this, she called me scared out of her mind and told me to look in the back, and it genuinely hurts my head. She was home alone. I was on the phone with her when she took the photo too. The first image is the original, the second is an enhanced version. We recognize her as my aunt who has passed. You can even barely make out the Winnie the Pooh on the right of her chest. So this is the original picture, and again, she only took it because she noticed that thread on the blanket just standing up straight. They weren't looking at anything around. That was the focus of taking the picture. This is a closer look of the picture. You can see the thread just standing up, but 3 months after taking this, she's looking at the picture again and notice that this end of the picture is looking really dark. This is a closer look of the the really dark space in her room. This is the enhanced version of the picture. Of course, I'm very curious, so I did go get the original picture and enhance it myself, and there's definitely somebody standing there. And not just standing there, but to me it looks like maybe she's smiling or doing something with her mouth. And who would I be if I did not like super zoom in on this, because you could definitely tell there's a Winnie the Pooh right there. Now, some people who did read the caption were like, well, why don't they send us a picture of their aunt just to confirm? Well, because they don't have to. They don't have to. They're just sharing something, whether you believe it or not, that's fine. Obviously we can all have our own opinions, but just them trying to share their experience, share what they captured, whether you believe it or not. Because obviously none of us were there. Like, we weren't there in the room with her taking the picture, so I also feel like if they were to have sent a picture, we would still question that too, so there's no point. But that's just my opinion. Again, that's just me. But yeah, what do you guys think? I feel like even if it was my sister, my aunt, my grandmother, I'd be a little freaked out, because that's a whole full body apparition if it is. Like, in my head, she's smiling, laughing, knowing that maybe she made that string stand up, and maybe the mom was freaking out, because that would be something I would do. Like, if I passed away and I can be a ghost, you better believe I'm about to scare the shit out of my siblings.
I'm surprised a lot of you haven't heard the stories of what happens to influencers and S-workers in Dubai. So let me tell you what I know.
Recently, the story of OF model Maria Kovalchuk has been going viral. She was a model who allegedly attended an exclusive party in Dubai, went missing, and was found with a broken spine and other limbs days later on the side of the road. Women for years have been raising the alarm about these parties going on in Dubai. According to them, these modeling agencies will reach out and claim that they have incredible opportunities for them, saying that they'll fly them out to Dubai, they'll pay for all their lodging, all their food, and they'll pay them an extremely high amount of money. They just have to do some things while they're there. One of these things is allegedly a porta potty party, where the rich and elite men from Dubai society pay to urinate and defecate in and on women, and sometimes in their mouths. Other women have claimed that these men just like to beat women. They pay a lot of money to be able to beat the shit out of random women. Other claims seem like they're straight out of the film Hostel, with some women claiming that these men like to hang women on hooks and then brutally beat them while they're strung up in the air. Another thing that I find really disturbing about all of this is the mentality towards women. These men, according to women who have been to these parties, love to degrade women. They like calling them names, they like sexually assaulting them, they beat them, they sexually assault them, they're incredibly rude and misogynistic. And then of course, you get into stuff like the porta potty events. This stuff is straight out of a horror film, I'm telling you guys. Women who attend these parties can be paid sometimes upwards of $100,000. And I've seen interviews with women claiming that the more vile the act they're asked to perform, the more money they're paid. And once again, like I said, straight out of a horror film, I've even seen clips of women claiming that they were paid or they'd seen others being paid to do things with animals and to let animals do things to them. All while these groups of rich and wealthy men from the country stand around rejoicing, pleasuring themselves, filming, taking pictures. I mean, this stuff is straight out of a nightmare and it really makes me sick to my stomach. Hopefully we're going to get answers in the case of Maria soon, but the authorities in Dubai have already claimed that she suffered an accident. They're claiming that she wandered into an empty construction site, climbed some equipment, and fell to the ground. That's really what they're going with. In my mind, it seems more likely that they're protecting some of the elite members of their society by claiming that, but who am I to judge? I'm just some dude on the internet, right?
Let's talk about something absolutely horrifying that happened to my boyfriend last night. If you're new here, hi. I usually talk about some pretty scary stuff on here, and today I'm going to talk about yet another run-in that my boyfriend had. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I told a story a couple weeks ago about how my boyfriend years ago decided to taunt an entity that resides within a doll. A very famous haunted doll at that. And something pretty terrifying happened to him last night because he was watching a video about another haunted doll. Only this time he wasn't directly taunting it. So let's get into it. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the YouTubers Sam and Colby or the Paranormal Investigators or whatever you know them as. I've personally been a longtime fan of Sam and Colby, and as of recently, I have gotten my boyfriend to watch their videos with me. And he's enjoyed watching their videos so much that he has started to watch them alone. And last night, he decided to watch the video of Sam and Colby going to Zach Bagans' haunted museum. And if you're not familiar with where I'm talking about, Zach Bagans is the lead investigator on Ghost Adventures, and he opened up a museum in Las Vegas that holds a lot of haunted items. So many haunted items, in fact, that you're not allowed to touch anything in the museum. And I have heard insane stories about people having severe adverse effects to going to this museum. Anyways, he's watching this video of Sam and Colby going and investigating this museum, and they particularly mention this doll. Now, I'm not familiar with this doll. I have not watched the video, and after my boyfriend's experience, I don't want to watch the video. But it is said that if you look this doll in the eyes, even through screens, weird stuff will happen. And they particularly mention electricity. So my boyfriend is watching this video at night, and he said that he heard the doll come up, that he was on his phone going through Facebook Marketplace, whatever. The eyes were blacked out. And they, Sam and Colby, said, if you don't want to see this doll, look away, because they were going to remove the black over its eyes. My boyfriend never even looked at the doll. And right after they showed the doll, he has little Christmas lights underneath his TV. Half of them went out. And on top of that, his TV started to glitch. So he decided to pick up the remote, try to exit out. It wouldn't let him exit out of the video. So being freaked out at this point, he turns the overhead light on in his room. And as he does that, more of the Christmas lights go out and the overhead light starts to flicker, which is exactly what they said would happen if you looked at this doll. At this point, my boyfriend goes downstairs and kind of just waits it out, I guess. And by the time he went back upstairs, it was over. I just find it so fascinating that both of my boyfriend's run-ins with entities that resided in dolls were predominantly paranormal activity that occurred via electricity. And speaking of dolls, I'm going to visit the Haunted Museum in my hometown and take you guys with me, where the first haunted doll that I mentioned resides. But that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories and hopefully visits.
If you think nothing will truly disturb you or keep you up at night, I dare you to look up how many people have gone missing from Nome, Alaska. Because from 1960 to 2004 alone, 24 people disappeared from this remote, isolated town, and it is terrifying. That's what happened to Joseph Balderas and Florence Okpialuk, who disappeared within 4 years of each other in Nome. Residents in the town are on edge because of these mysterious disappearances that just keep happening, and the majority of them are still unsolved, so let's talk about it. This disturbing reality was brought to my awareness after listening to the Up and Vanish podcast, where the host, Payne Lindsay, actually traveled to Nome to investigate the disappearances of Joseph and Florence. Their new season sheds light on how both of them seemingly vanished into thin air. Let's start with Joseph. Joseph moved to Nome in 2014 and quickly fell in love with the little town. He was a law clerk with Nome's 2nd District Court. He was described as incredibly smart, kind, and was good at pretty much everything he did. He was about to move to Juneau with his fiancée, and overall life just seemed really great for them. That is until June of 2016. Joseph was last seen on June 24th, 2016, but he very mysteriously disappeared after this, and what followed has never been explained. 3 days came and went with no sign of Joseph. His fiancée wasn't able to get a hold of him, and he no-called, no-showed work, which was extremely out of character for him. So one of his colleagues reported him missing, and a massive search was launched. That very same day, police found his abandoned truck at mile 44 of the Nome Council Highway. It was unlocked, and inside was his backpack that contained fishing supplies, waders, and boots, but Joseph was nowhere to be found. Police assumed that he was just in the area hiking or running, but it would soon be clear that something horrible happened to him. Police, along with search and rescue and the U.S. Coast Guard, scoured the area for Joseph, but found nothing, and it was like he vanished into thin air. The search for Joseph was called off after just 9 days after finding no evidence of what happened to him. Police are not ruling out foul play, and there are some theories as to what could have happened, but to this day, Joseph and the truth remain missing. It didn't take long for tragedy to strike Nome again, because just 4 years later, another person would go missing under mysterious circumstances. Florence Okpialuk was 33 years old when she disappeared from Nome on August 31st, 2020. Florence was a native of Wheels, Alaska, but had moved to Nome in 2013. Similar to Joseph, she was last seen leaving a tent on West Beach at around 4 p.m. that day, and after this, she vanished into thin air. A massive search for her was conducted as well, which involved Nome police, the FBI, and the U.S. Coast Guard, but the only thing ever found was Florence's shoes, socks, and jacket. And just like Joseph, to this day, Florence remains missing. So I heard about this disturbing mystery after listening to the podcast Up and Vanished. I don't know if any of you listen to this podcast, but the host, Payne Lindsay, is so incredibly talented. This isn't just a typical true crime podcast, because Payne and his team have spent years working together and traveling to different places like Nome to get on-the-ground coverage, which is pretty rare for a podcast. He is extremely hands-on, and his approach is boots-on-the-ground investigative journalism, which I love. His new season already has 2 parts that are up and ready to listen to, and I highly suggest you all go listen to this. It's insane what he's able to uncover by simply going to these places and investigating, especially since these cases have stalled. So he's really picking up where the police have left off, directly working with the victims' families to get justice for their loved ones. You can listen to Up and Vanished on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, but I'm curious to know what you guys think is really happening in Nome, Alaska.
This is one of the most terrifying ghost stories I've ever heard. If you're new here, hi. I just talk about some pretty scary stuff, and recently I opened an email which allowed everyone who finds this page to submit their ghost stories. And let me tell you, not only have I been getting a lot of submissions and a lot of ghost stories to read that are from every corner of the world, I have been reading the most terrifying, haunting, bone-chilling stories I've ever heard in my life. And this is without a doubt one of them. So let's get into it. The story comes from Orly, who at the time was 10 years old. So Orly and her family head up to Springfield, Illinois to help with her aunt who had stage 4 breast cancer. However, Orly's family did not want to stay at Orly's aunt's house because they didn't want to overwhelm her with the amount of people in her house. So they stayed with her aunt's friend. And this property was a huge house from the 1800s that sat on a prairie. They all arrived pretty late at night, so they were just shown to their rooms and they went to bed. Orly stayed in the same room with her 2 other sisters, and her parents slept in a separate room. And it is at this point in the story where I got chills. Orly says she wakes up in the middle of the night to a man sitting on her legs staring at her. He was wearing old clothing and he had suspenders, and he looked about 60 to 70 years old. And she notes that it was really weird because she could see him so vividly but could not feel his weight on her legs. Orly tried to get the attention of her sister, but no sound was coming out because of how terrified she was. So she pulled the sleeping bag up over her face and just thought it was a dream and tried to wake herself up. After a few minutes, she knew that she wasn't sleeping, so she pulls the sleeping bag back down over her face, and hopefully whatever was sitting on her legs would be gone. But he wasn't gone. In fact, he did a full 180, and instead of staring at Orly, he was staring just straight ahead, and she was unable to see his face. And now Orly is convinced that this is real, so she just pulls the sleeping bag back over her face and forces herself to go to sleep. When Orly woke up the next morning and got into the car with her family to drive to her aunt's house, she told her family what she saw. Her parents exchanged a glance and then said, "Did you see his wife?" And it turns out that her parents had also had a very similar experience. Her parents woke up and saw the same man that Orly saw standing over their bed. And the second time, they saw him and his wife sitting at the foot of their bed staring at them. And the following morning, they talked to the owner of the property that they stayed at, and she confirms that yes, this couple used to live on the property and regularly interacts with her, the owner of the property. The owner of the property says that she can see them walking through the prairie sometimes. She can hear them walking through the house, and sometimes they move things in the kitchen. Not only that, her dogs can see these people too and also interact with these spirits. And Orly says at the end of this that for years she's been trying to come up with an explanation to this because nobody believes this story. But there is no other explanation, and even when she goes to her parents to ask if she just imagined this whole thing up, and she explains and describes this man that she saw, they remember it just as vividly as she does. I personally believe the story 110%. What really got me was when he was sitting on her legs in the middle of the night. I don't like that. But that's gonna do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
And so after he did all of that, right, she started to have some really vivid dreams. She constantly was having dreams of her father attacking her. And the more dreams she was having, she started to prey on them. And so every time she had a bad dream, she would pray about the dream, asking God to reveal to her what is going on. And so one day she went to sleep and she had a dream that she was at a cornfield. It was huge and she was the only one there, or so she thought. From afar, she looks like there's somebody standing there, and so she tries to walk towards the person, only to realize that that person is her father. And the closer to him that she got, the more she realized that he was holding a doll made of her, like it was a doll of her. And her father was looking at her with this look, this evil look. And the first thing her father says to her is, "Why won't you marry that man?" And she woke up from the dream. Now, it may sound like the dream wasn't that bad, but to her, it was terrifying. But it also revealed to her what her father was doing. The fact that her father was holding the doll of her told her everything she needs to know, because she's been having weird dreams and things just haven't been going well for her. And so she decides, you know what? Whatever. I'm not marrying this man and I am gonna leave the house. And so she went up to her parents and told them, I'm not marrying that man, and if you guys don't like it, if you guys mean it that I have to leave, then I'm leaving. But that was her mistake, because I feel as though she should have did that quietly, because now her father is angry. And she actually did. She moved out, she got all her stuff, and she went to live with an aunt from her mom's side. Now, mind you, nobody from her mom's side likes her dad. They're the type of family that kept telling her about this man for a very long time, and she just kept choosing this man over them. And so, of course, they welcomed her with open arms. Now, when the guy that she was supposed to marry heard about all of this, he took it upon himself to contact her to apologize for everything that's been going on. And they started to talk more and more, and they actually started to like each other. But mind you, the dad doesn't know that, because they kept that between them. Now, her dad is angry to the point where he's like, you know what? You want to do me like that? I'm going to get you off this earth. And so he went back to that same voodoo priest in an attempt to unalive his daughter. And so the dreams started with her again, except this time she started to physically feel sick. Like, she feels like she's fighting something, but she doesn't know what she's fighting. And thank goodness her aunts that she was living with, they're prayer warriors, okay? And so they started to have dreams too, except that the dreams was revealing exactly what the father is doing. Now, at first she was in denial, but when things started, like really bad things started to happen to her, she's like, okay, I get it. And so they started to pray every day. She started to fast. And the more she prayed, the more things started to get better. But the worse things started to get for her dad. Everything that her dad was trying to do to her started to backfire on him. He's falling out with everybody in his life. He lost his job. He got into a car accident. Like, anything you can think of was happening to him, and he was losing his mind. But of course he was blaming it on his daughter because his daughter did not want to marry that rich man's son. So imagine his anger when he found out that 2 years later that she actually did marry that man. Now, remember when I told y'all that they started to talk, they started to date, and they actually really liked each other. And 2 years later, they got married. They just never told the dad or the mom. She told her siblings. Her siblings was at the wedding, but they also didn't say anything to them. And once the guy that she married, the husband, told her father, well, his father, how her father really was, he also stopped being friends with him. It's crazy how God works, and it's crazy how karma works, because she is actually now rich, but she cut all ties with her father.
Trigger warning, please don't watch this alone at night or in the dark, and please read Ayatul Kursi because I don't want to be responsible for any hauntings. Jinns are supernatural creatures from Arabic mythology, said to have the power of free will, so their personalities can vary greatly. Some being decent, some being neutral, and others being evil. Jinns allegedly have the ability to shapeshift and appear as humans if they wanted to, or even animals. There's this guy, he was born in the United States and he was raised in a community and a family who believed in the supernatural and jinns. The community believes that children have the ability to sense supernatural activity that us adults do not have the ability to see or sense, or that we choose to ignore. In the summer of 2009, this guy and his family travelled back home to Iraq. A few years after the war was quote unquote over. So this guy's dad has not seen his side of his family for over 20 years, and he thought this is the perfect time to bring his family to Iraq so his children can learn about the culture and meet his side of the family. However, Iraq in 2009 was hot, had no electricity, and had a lot of terror groups running around. Besides all of this, this guy was still excited to go to Iraq to see and explore his culture and meet his family. One day, he was getting ready to go visit his family member. He was with two of his cousins. One was 4 years old and the other was only 2. To reach his family member's home, they had to pass this abandoned house that the local residents and communities called the Jinn House. Multiple families have attempted to move in and live in this Jinn house. They were either scared out of the house or a tragedy would appear which would force them to move. The last tenants who lived in that house suffered a lot. At first, little things would happen, like they would wake up and they'll find their TV set completely flipped upside down, but then it started to progress. Every other morning they'd wake up to their furniture being moved outside of the house. But then the youngest son began sleepwalking. In the night he would wake up and walk to the cemetery and back. He had no idea he was doing this. One night while sleepwalking, the boy picked up a gun and shot one of his sisters dead. The house then caught on fire and the family had to run out. The boy does not remember anything and the remaining sister is medically insane. Anyways, back to this guy who had his 2 little cousins who started to walk past this house. This was the only way he knew at the time to get to his family member's house where he was trying to go. And he had his 2-year-old cousin in his arms. As he was walking past this house, he did not want to look because he was terrified and he felt a really bad energy. Something made him look. He glanced at the house. All the windows were busted and the house was surrounded in trash with TV sets and bin bags and just covered all in trash. And what he saw next, the roof of the house, he could only describe this thing that he saw that had a body of a donkey and was sitting like a cat. When he saw this creature, then both of his little cousins started screaming at the same time. The 2-year-old was in his arms facing his chest, so there was no way this kid saw what this guy was seeing. This guy's brain could not physically compute what he was saying. And then this creature started to stand up, and that's when he grabbed his 4-year-old cousin and just started to bolt and run as fast as he can away from this creature. To this very day, this guy, oh my god. Oh, this is why I don't film this stuff. Okay, I'm getting scared, but anyways, this guy does not speak about this because his brain physically cannot compute like what he saw, but he knows it's something above like human understanding. I'm getting really scared now, so I'm gonna go. But let me guys know what you think this was, if it was like a djinn as an animal, or if his mind was just playing tricks on him.
Imagine browsing around a shopping centre, then seeing a woman being murdered in broad daylight. It was the 13th of September 2005 in Knightsbridge in London. 22-year-old Claire Bernal was living in the area after landing a great job working at Harvey Nichols. She worked as a beauty consultant and had a small flat where she lived with some colleagues, and she loved the setup that they had. Claire had grown up in Tunbridge Wells. She was stunning and had a real eye for anything makeup and beauty. Shortly after starting work there, she actually caught the eye of one of the security guards who also worked in the building. This was 30-year-old ex-soldier Michael Pesh. Now, he built up the courage to ask Claire out and was overjoyed when she agreed. She said, "Yeah, I'll let you take me on a date." But Michael was very overbearing. Claire was young and beautiful. She literally had just agreed to start dating this guy. She didn't sign up to marry him. He was not happy about this at all, and after only going on a couple of dates with her, claimed to be in love with her. This was obviously a huge red flag, and Claire confided in her mum that she really didn't like how he was pressuring her. This was going way too fast for her liking. He was very intense. But it was obviously pretty awkward because the pair did work together, so she really struggled to get any space from him. Claire was quite relieved when he ended up taking a little break from work to fly back to Slovakia, his home country, to see his family. But she really couldn't get away from him that easily. Immediately upon his return, he demanded that she collected him from the airport. She agreed to keep the peace, but when she collected him, he then demanded staying over at her house for the night. Again, feeling really uncomfortable with where this was going, she obliged. She thought the ordeal would be over in the morning when he would leave. But again, the following day, he refused to leave her house, and the pair ended up having a really big argument, and she just called this whole thing off. She said she didn't want to see him anymore. He was super full on, and the relationship was just going way too fast. But Michael was relentless. He would repeatedly call her, text her constantly, even turn up to her flat and refuse to leave, and all of her flatmates would see this crazy behavior, and he just didn't care. His texts went from pestering to threatening. He would threaten to unalive himself if she didn't give him another chance, and he also subtly started threatening her. Then on the 30th of March, he got onto the same train that she boarded at London Bridge. She actually, at this point, threatened to report him, to which he responded by getting right up in her face and saying that if she reported him, he would kill her. And the pair, like I said, even worked together, so she physically couldn't get away from this man. He sometimes even followed her home from work, which was absolutely terrifying. Now, thankfully, Michael's manager ended up suspending him from work for his behaviour, but unfortunately, this kind of seemed to make matters worse. As he got his things to leave, he chillingly made a comment to a colleague. He said, "How long would he go to prison for murder in the UK?" Now, Claire was informed of this and, terrified, reported it to the police. And this, you would think, should have been the end of it. Michael was sacked and he was arrested. Now, police reassured Claire that Michael's bail conditions meant he wasn't allowed anywhere near her, but do you think Michael was going to listen? She finally felt she could get back to normal. But on the 13th of September, all hell would break loose. At 7:45 p.m, staff were preparing to close the store. A few customers continued browsing, and Claire stood at the cosmetics counter, totally unaware of what was about to happen. Suddenly, Michael appeared out of nowhere. He was holding a gun. He snuck up behind Claire before casually firing the weapon into the back of her head. In an instant, she fell to the floor, and Michael callously shot her again 3 times in the face. He then calmly turned the weapon on himself. Both Michael and Claire were pronounced dead at the scene. Horrifically, Claire's mum had a knock on the door at 2:45 a.m. to tell her the horrific news. Claire's family have tirelessly campaigned for better protection for women against stalking.
This is how I found out I was living inside of a literal haunted house, part 2. Also, before I begin, just in case TikTok does shut down, here are my other socials, and make sure to subscribe to my YouTube because I'm always posting Storytimes there. So if you remember from my first Storytime about this, I only told it from my experiences. So now I'm gonna share my family members' experiences, specifically my mom, in this haunted house. So this story happened to my mom while she was pregnant with my little brother, and I still remember the horror on her face when she asked us about it, and we were like, huh, what are you talking about? So when my mom was about 7-8 months pregnant, I would say, she was very much bedridden because of how big her stomach was. And this obviously made her back hurt, so she spent most of her time, laying on her bed or hanging out in the living room on the couch. So this happened at night, like on a random weekend, because I remember staying up like really late when this all went down. And also I remember, if it was a weekday, I wouldn't have been up. My mom would be like, no, you need to get to sleep now. You got school in the morning. So maybe it was a good thing the ghost or whatever it was did what it did on a weekend, because if it was a weekday, my mom would have been alone in the dark. So I remember I was hanging out in my brother's room, which was right next to my parents' room. And my mom, she was laying down in the room doing whatever. My brother and I, we were honestly minding our own business. Like, we were playing games and stuff. So we had no clue what was going on outside of our room. So my mom ended up telling me 2 major things that happened in the span of like 5 minutes, but to her it felt like hours. Just because of how petrified she was. She told me she was on her bed, on her phone with the nightstand light on. Also, keep in mind, because I'm in my brother's room right now, no one is in the hallway, no one is in the living room, no one is in the kitchen. So right now the house is in complete darkness. The only lights on are my brother's room and my parents' room, but the doors are closed. Y'all need to keep that in the back of your head. While my mom was on her phone watching some YouTube, she told me she started to feel a discomfort in her stomach area. Which, at first she just assumed it was the baby kicking or moving around, but it started to become a very sharp, almost stabbing sensation. She told me that while this was happening, she started to look around the room for water because she thought that was the best thing that could help with this pain. Since she couldn't take a painkiller, obviously, she's pregnant. She told me that there ended up being no waters in her room, and that's when she called out both my name and my brother's name, just so we could help her get some water because it would hurt if she walked all the way down to the kitchen, then came all the way back. So yeah, she just needed that extra help. She said that after she called her names a few times, she finally received an answer from a voice that sounded like mine. She told me that voice apparently said, "What?" She then briefly explained to this voice what was happening and to get her water from the kitchen. That's when it faintly responded back, "Okay." My mom then decided to sit back down on the edge of the bed, waiting for her water. She said she literally heard footsteps walking down to the hallway, down to the kitchen, then coming all the way back up to her room. The only thing is that the footsteps stopped in front of her door, and that was it. She then said, "You can come in," thinking that it was me. But there was no response. So at this point, my mom thought that she was being messed with by me, and she yelled out, "Jordan, you better stop playing with me because I need that water now." But all funny stuff aside, here's where it got weird. Right after she said that, the door opened, but it wasn't like a swing open type open, if that makes sense. It opened slow and slightly, and then it stopped. So my mom said in this moment, she kind of froze because she was thinking, what am I doing? But the whole time, I wasn't there. I wasn't the one that responded to my mom, nor did I walk up and down that hallway, nor did I just open that door. Because remember, y'all, this whole time, I was in my brother's room. And what was so weird was that we didn't hear any of this going on. Like, we never heard our mom calling out for water or anything. It was like the room that we were in was soundproof. During this whole entire incident, we heard nothing. So anyways, the door is slightly open and my mom gets up with the intent to yell at me for messing around. She said when she opened the door, all she saw was a dark hallway in front of her and she felt this really cold breeze. That's when she heard a thump and saw a bottle of water rolling her way, and it stopped on the side of her door. She told me she immediately walked over to my brother's room and started banging on the door, and I remember it because it was insane. When I tell y'all, we opened it with quickness, thinking that her water broke or something, but when we opened the door, her face looked so petrified. So she explained to us what just happened and was like, "Were one of you guys messing with me?" And we told her we were in the room the whole entire time. Like, we never stepped foot out of this room. So we have no idea who rolled that water, where it came from, and what's really funny is that when she told us that, I was like, no, you need to throw that out. It was ghost infected. Now listen, the ghost, it had good intentions, okay? Or whatever it was, it had good intentions. The approach just wasn't it. It was scary. Anyways, fast forward, I ended up sleeping in my mom's room until my dad came home from work. And I still remember after that day, whenever my mom would need help with something, as a joke, she would yell out, "I only need my children's help, thank you."
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
So I'm going to tell you how this man died, and then I want you to tell me if you think this was by his own doing, because the police are saying that he ended his own life, but I am just not buying it. So on the evening of September 27th, 2015, Joseph Smedley disappeared after leaving his home. He was found dead 5 days later, floating in a lake with a pair of binoculars tied around his neck and a backpack that contained 66 pounds of rocks strapped tightly to his chest. This was 45 minutes from his home, with no explanation on how he got there, and the lake was only 5 feet deep when Joseph was 5'7". Police are saying that he ended his own life by drowning himself, but at any point he could have stood straight up and his head would have been out of the water. This is the mysterious death of Joseph Smedley, and more people need to know what happened to him, so let's talk about it. Joseph was 20 years old when he suddenly and very mysteriously died in 2015. He didn't have the best home life growing up, with his parents divorcing when he was in 3rd grade. And to make matters worse, he didn't have a good relationship with his mom or his dad, but one person that remained close with him was his sister, Vivian. At 16 years old, Joseph became emancipated and moved in with one of his best friends. So just 2 years later, when it was time to leave for college, he was so excited for a fresh start. Joseph enrolled at Indiana University in Bloomington, where he studied biochemistry, and things were looking up for him. His time at IU really gave him a lot of independence, and he thrived with the routine and schoolwork, and he made a lot of friends too. Fast forward to September 21st, 2015, which was now well into Joseph's sophomore year. Joseph's sister Vivian got a call from his landlord who said that Joseph owed him $680 for terminating his lease early. Vivian co-signed on the lease for Joseph, so she was the next person in line to talk to if there were any questions regarding money. The landlord said that Joseph already planned to swing by and drop off a check for the money he owed on the 28th of September, but he was just calling anyway to make sure that that was still the plan. So Vivian called Joseph on the 27th as a reminder to drop off the check no later than noon the following day, and he reassured her that that was still the plan and not to worry. But that would never happen, as Joseph mysteriously disappeared after this, and what followed has never really been explained. The next morning, Vivian woke up to a really strange text from Joseph. He told her that he was leaving the country in order to protect her, and he said not to call as he would be in touch once he settled down wherever he was going. Vivian thought this was a prank at first because Joseph was known to be a bit of a jokester, and she really didn't think much of this, so she texted him back and said, "Hey, don't forget to pay your landlord today." But as the day went on, worry started to set in, as every call to Joseph would go straight to voicemail, and then his landlord called Vivian to let her know that he never showed up to drop off his check. I think this is really when it started to set in that something was not right, so she reported him missing to the Bloomington police. IU police ended up conducting a welfare check later that day, and this is when they found that not only had he not attended classes that entire day, which was not normal for him, but he was also missing from his house. According to the police, the last people to ever see him were his roommates, who were also his frat brothers at Sigma Pi. They last saw him the night prior, which was the 27th, and apparently no one saw him after this or knew where he could have been. During all of this, a weird clerical mistake happened, which involved Bloomington police. They ended up calling Vivian and told her not to worry, that Joseph is okay and he's actually just in jail. But really that was not the case, and Joseph was still actively missing. How that happened, I really don't know. So all of this is especially strange. You have a missing young man, no one knows where he is, and his sister gets a strange text that didn't really sound like him looking back. But this is where the story starts to get really strange, because just 5 days later, Joseph would be found, but his discovery would only spark more questions than answers. So on the evening of October 2nd, 2015, a fisherman who was out on Griffey Lake in Bloomington found a badly decomposing body floating in the water. The body was of a man who had a pair of binoculars tied around his neck, but what's even stranger is that this man also had a backpack strapped tightly to his chest, and inside that backpack was 66 pounds of rocks, initially weighing him down to the bottom of the lake. After an autopsy was conducted, the Monroe County Coroner's Office determined that the body found in the lake was Joseph. But what's even more shocking is that after 2 months of investigating, they ruled his cause and manner of death as a suicide by drowning. Authorities officially ruled that foul play was not involved, but his family and so many other people don't believe this, and here's here's why. First off, according to his friends and family, Joseph wasn't depressed or suicidal, which I know doesn't always mean anything and that sometimes the signs just aren't there. But they don't believe that he would end his own life like that, especially by drowning. And then in the autopsy and medical notes, authorities wouldn't state what was found in his backpack. Certain paperwork said that his backpack was filled with bricks, while others said that it was filled with rocks. And that might not seem super important, but it is, because in and around Griffey Lake, there are hardly any rocks, especially not enough to fill your backpack and weigh 66 pounds. And if he did end his own life, it just doesn't seem physically possible, because he was found in Griffey Lake, but more specifically, he was found near the Headley Road Bridge, which was right next to Indiana University, and pretty close in proximity to the football stadium at the school. This was roughly 40 minutes from his home, so he would have had to walk 40 minutes to the lake, possibly with his backpack already filled with 66 pounds of rocks, and then walk off a bridge into 5 feet of water. And Joseph was 5'7", meaning he could have, at any point, just stood up and his head would have been out of the water. It just doesn't seem like someone would choose to end their own life that way, and some suggest that he was injured or unconscious before being placed in the water, so that he couldn't defend himself and just stand up. So because of the unusual circumstances around his case, and the fact that Bloomington police wouldn't give his family any information or answers, his sister Vivian actually had a second independent autopsy conducted, and the results are chilling. So the second medical examiner found extensive trauma to Joseph's back that was somehow missed during the first autopsy. One of the main questions people have is why there were binoculars around Joseph's neck, and the only answer that anyone can come up with is that on the night he disappeared, he could have been out on or near the lake with his roommates / frat brothers, using the binoculars to watch the blood moon that was happening that night. This hasn't been 100% confirmed, but it's just a theory as to why he could have had those around his neck. It's just weird that with all of this odd evidence and the strange circumstances around this case, that the police still say that there's no foul play in his disappearance or death. Joseph was a great swimmer and incredibly smart, and so many people just don't think that he did this to himself. His family has gone on to create this Facebook page where they continue to fight for justice for Joseph, and they've also created this petition to hopefully get the Bloomington PD to reopen his case and give it a proper investigation. So if you feel so inclined, please give that a sign and go follow that Facebook page to show your support. But it's now been 10 years, and whatever happened to Joseph that night out on the lake remains a mystery.
This is why you should not pick up random phone calls, and my aunt sadly learned it the hard way. Before I begin, just in case TikTok does shut down, here are my other socials, and make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel because I'm always posting story times there. This story actually happened quite recently, and when my aunt told me this, whenever I get a random phone number calling my phone, my heart drops. So my aunt used to live alone in South Jersey in her 1-bedroom apartment, and her job was basically working as customer service for this company. So she just answered phone calls all day, speaking to customers and helping them out with whatever problems or needs that they have. So picking up random phone numbers wasn't something new. You know, it was practically in her blood. Like, it was a daily routine. She told me that one day, working at her job, she had to help out one customer with a problem. Once again, nothing new, so she got to work. Also, keep in mind, this isn't an at-home job. Right now, she's like in an office. Anyways, she told me that after her work was done and, you know, before she hung up on the customer, he, the customer, decided to love bomb her with compliments, saying how she had a beautiful voice, yada yada yada. So of course, the polite thing to do is to say thank you and go on with your day. And that's what she did, and you know, it wasn't anything too serious to think about. So she thought. She told me that after that day, that man would call customer service and specifically ask to speak to my aunt. And when he couldn't speak with her, he would threaten the company, saying how he would call the higher ups and leave bad reviews, and honestly just complain and say how they have horrible customer service. And of course, the company did not want that, so they ended up always putting him on my aunt's line. And when she told me that, I was like, yo, what? Like, that's disgusting. Like, the company, well, like, what are you doing? Like, you know someone is harassing your workers and you don't do anything to stop it because you care about a simple review or money? Like, what? And also keep in mind, because my aunt really needed this job, it's not like she could just straight up say, no, I don't want to work with him. You know, she'll get fired. So anyways, fast forward, days go on, and finally my aunt doesn't hear anything from this man anymore. He doesn't call the customer service line. Nothing. It's just complete silence from his end. She told me at this point she thought that she was free, but here's where it got insane. She told me that one day she was making dinner in her kitchen when she received a random phone call from her house phone. She picked it up, she said hello, and there was no response, so she hung up. About 5 seconds later, the same number. So she did it again. She picked it up, she said hello, there was no response, hung it up. 5 seconds again, the same random number. This time, she was fed up. She picked it up and said, whoever's prank calling, stop. That's when the voice on the other end said, is this? And it was my aunt's name. She said in that moment she froze because she said she knew whose voice that was. That was the man that was calling her all the time at her job. So in that moment she tried to lie and she said, "No, but how did you get this number?" When she said that, he didn't answer and instead hung up right away. So my aunt told me at this point she was scared because how in the world did this man get her number? And it wasn't even like her phone number, it was her house number. Fast forward the next day, she came back from work and she heard beeping coming from her house phone. She saw that her missed call message inbox was full. She ended up listening to every single missed message and it was from that guy. She told me how he was basically saying how he was happy that he found her number and that she didn't have to pick up because her voice message, after like when you don't pick up the phone, it like leaves a voicemail message, that was enough for him to hear. He said how all he needed was her name and the place of work that she was at, and that's how he got the number. He said a bunch of more creepy stuff that she told me that I don't want to say on here, and she ended up blocking the number. She told me that was the worst mistake that she ever made in her life, blocking him on the house phone, because as soon as he found out that he was blocked, he got a hold of her mobile number and would non-stop send messages. And what's so mind-boggling is that when she told me that she would block him on her phone, he would get those fake number apps and then text her from there. This man went as far as changing his number and even getting a new phone to message my aunt. So my aunt said that this went on for weeks and she honestly didn't know what to do because there was nothing that she could do. She went to the police for help and they were useless. She went to her job for help and they were useless. And what's crazy is that if he could go as far as buying a new phone and changing his number just to message her, what else could he do? Fast forward, my aunt told me the next few weeks was like a pattern. 1 week he would call non-stop, then it was silent for the next week. Then the next week came letters, and then the next week after that, silence. She told me it was like he was planning something, and that's exactly what he was doing. My aunt said that when she received her first letter from this man, she knew exactly what was coming next. And it was that he was going to show up to her house. Keep in mind, y'all, my aunt lives alone. She told me for the next 2 weeks, she was paranoid. She was paranoid at her job, going shopping, walking back to her apartment, honestly being out in public. She was paranoid. She was terrified. She had absolutely no idea how this man got a hold of her address to send letters. And I remember one night she was on the phone with my mom, sobbing because she was scared for her life. There were times when she would spend the night at our house because we both lived in Jersey. The only thing is that her job was so far away that she couldn't just, travel back and forth. It was too much for her. But my mom ended up telling her to call the police nonstop and make them show up, and that's exactly what she did. Fast forward, this was the week that she knew that he could possibly show up at her house. So she had the police hide out near her apartment, and y'all, this man showed up on a random Wednesday afternoon. This big old man was literally banging on her door saying, "Come outside, I really want to meet you." My aunt alerted the police that were outside on watch, and in short, he was arrested, and my aunt, because she was so traumatized by this incident, she ended up moving out of Jersey for her own safety. What's crazy is that this man traveled miles, and I'm talking miles, to show up at my aunt's house. But y'all, whenever I get a random phone number calling my phone, I always think about what happened to my aunt, and I'm like, oh no, is this my stalker? What's gonna happen, y'all? What's gonna happen to me?